I am so glad. I'm so glad to be here with all of you again. It's been a while. I mentioned at the when I first joined that I'm feeling a little underwater these days, and some of you may be as well. So I'm hoping this will be as interactive as possible. I'm going to share things that are kind of top of mind for me, some intelligence, such as it is, that I might have from conversations at the national level. But there's so much activity that's happening right now at the state level, as is so often the case. So I really welcome and appreciate folks actually telling me your questions and your ideas and your suggestions and what intelligence you're hearing. So thank you for having me, and I'll just jump right in. Um, these are the things that I talked to Andrea about that are top of mind for me, and may that all of you have contributed or had some role already, I know, in some of these. So the recent request for information on digital literacy and resilience, the IIJA programs, because there is an intersection with workforce and obviously a focus that includes digital literacy. The opportunity for WIOA reauthorization in 2023. The act that's mentioned here was introduced at the end of last year as a placeholder, and it does seem that there's some bipartisan interest in this topic. So in theory, something could happen this year. And I just was on the phone earlier today with folks at the Department of Labor, ETA. They would like to offer a webinar with PLA on the Career One Stop. So I'm kind of curious what you all think about that idea. Again, if you think it's useful, then we will go ahead and work on enabling it. But if you don't think it's useful, then maybe we'll put a pause. And then any other opportunities that you're seeing or hearing, and time for some questions. Oh, and just as a word of introduction for those of you who don't know me, I'm a deputy director at the Public Library Association, and I also split my time with the ALA Public Policy and Advocacy Office. So I'm going to touch on resources and work that's happening both within our Public Policy Office in Washington, D.C. and the Public Library Association in Chicago. I am not looking at the chat, so I hope, Andrea, you'll flag something. I'm going to pause after each of these sections just because I'd love to hear what you all are thinking or any feedback that you have for me to take back, things that you'd like to see ALA doing, opportunities that you see that we should be taking advantage of, et cetera. So I will pause after each of these. The first thing I want to mention is the RFI and digital literacy and resilience. I know many of you contributed. The link here will take you to ALA's submission. I know that the chief officers of state library agencies also filed, and I also know that the National Skills Coalition filed. I don't know if those comments are going to be made public at some point whenever you email, as opposed to putting it in the docket, as you do with some other federal agency activities. You don't get to see it, which I regret personally, because I'm always interested to see what other people are talking about. But you can see ALA's filing here. You'll also note, and I want to thank anyone who responded to our survey asking for people's feedback about digital literacy and resilience and your examples. We did include, thanks to the January LibsWork meeting, we did include specifically about the Rhode Island Digital Literacy Program. And I'll also note that the National Skills Coalition had a great library example, so we stole that with permission, included that in ours as well. Our goal is to make sure that we're highlighting as much as possible and amplifying other work. So we tried to do that. These were the four themes that we used to introduce our topic, and these also were aligned with what the National Skills Coalition had in their template, which I think probably some of you, if not all of you, saw. And these resonated very much for me and what I see and hear from the library community. We obviously focused a little bit more on libraries and talked about investing in libraries as well as just overall investments in digital literacy and resilience. Pretty much anything we do will explicitly be focused on libraries and not just kind of general good practice as you would expect. We think in particular, a theme that is really important for us and for everybody in this space to continue to talk about is this issue of trust. And I really appreciated that the National Skills Coalition put this near the top of their list. I had a chance to talk with Amanda Bergson Skilcock. I know I'm butchering her name, at the National Skills Coalition, and she was getting ready to share their most recent research with the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. So one of the questions I had for her is if she knew what was going to happen next after this RFI. My experience is when a federal agency asks a bunch of questions, it means that they're thinking about restructuring existing programs or adding new programs. So that's what this signals to me, is that there would be new opportunities. What she said to me is that when she talked with the Department of Labor folks about the RFI, is that they were talking about discretionary programs. And is there a way to have digital literacy and digital resilience be more integrated in those discretionary programs? So I think that would be a great opportunity for libraries if that's a result. So that's something we're paying attention to, and hope that we can share more. But you all, and I know Natalie, one of the discretionary programs is that related to dislocated workers. So I think where any of you are working on these discretionary grant programs at the state level, I think you may see an increased opportunity related to digital literacy based on what I'm seeing and hearing. But here's my kind of pause to ask in terms of thoughts, reactions, or ideas, and then also kind of what I see the opportunities related to each of these. Like, why did ALA spend quite a lot of time in this RFI? Why was it important to us? And so here's just a couple of the things. Again, everything we do is about keeping library work visible and helping decision makers in federal agencies see libraries and see how libraries intersect with their programs, because we know that IMLS funding is important and significant, but it is tiny relative to the budget that other federal agencies have. And one of the key focuses for us is always to look for opportunities to make libraries eligible. That's the first bar, right? And we had some good progress on that with the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act several years ago. But then being eligible is not the same as having it be easy for libraries to apply. So we know that that work is not done just by becoming eligible, but it is the first step. So we wanted to keep libraries visible. This was a joint RFI from the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, and IMLS. So there were 4 federal agencies that had their finger in this RFI. And we know that digital literacy is relevant to all of these agencies. And it's also something that libraries are uniquely well positioned to support, and could use more funding to support that and to grow and expand what we offer. So those are the opportunities that I see, why we cared so much about it. I'm going to pause and see if folks have thoughts, reactions, ideas, other things that come into your mind when you were thinking about the RFI. If there's anything that you'd like to tell me or to ask about, I just want to give us a second before I move on to the next section.
Oops.
You want to go ahead, Lisa?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to raise my hand here. Yeah, just kind of tangential to this. We were approached in Maine by our Department of Economic and Community Development to help disperse around $2 million, which is a lot for Maine, more than I think we get through LSTA funds for workforce through our public libraries, which is like remote work, shared workspaces, teleworking, anything along those lines. So I hope kind of using that as an example of what could be done with libraries in tandem with other agencies, because obviously we're working with our community college system that has a remote work division, you know, Department of Labor, Department of Ed, and all that is what's really making this work is our agencies at the state level working together. The challenges that we've run into is SAM.gov, because even as sub-grantees, they have to have a unique identity number in SAM.gov. They don't have to do the full registration. And you're talking 255 public libraries, about 60% of them are 501c3s, the rest are municipal or some hybrid of governance. And I've also learned that some of our communities were incorporated before Maine was incorporated as a state, so their records are with the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office. And so we've had to come up with workarounds for that, because basically they're matching up what's submitted through SAM.gov with the Secretary of State's office. So lessons learned there, let me tell you. The GSA people in Region 1 for New England have been awesome. I love them so much, but there's a lot more that certainly can be done. And yeah, I'll keep you all informed on how that's progressing. We're doing it as a competitive grant process. And Arlene, you're so right. We're just trying to lower the barriers as much as possible for these libraries. I know IMLS has mentioned before that they'd like to see more submissions from rural and small libraries, but that process is a dog.
Totally agree.
And Cindy has her hand up.
Hey guys, yes, thanks. Can you see me? I don't know where I
Yeah.
can see myself. So there we go. Okay,
We can
hi. So yeah, so this is super exciting. I am so excited to know that ALA can always continue to promote make visible the work of libraries. Regarding your question, Laura, about the idea of leveraging the IMLS funded research. I also want to, and to Lisa's point about the importance of working with state agencies. I attended a distance or an adult learning conference for Texas adult basic education folks last week. And I have been in touch with the person that runs their adult basic education department. And they're running essentially a digital navigator program for all of their their adult basic education instructors and program managers are now running a digital navigator program to train those folks in how to be digital navigators. And they're getting their training through World Ed. And they also have set up a call center that's open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for all students and instructors for their that are enrolled in adult basic ed classes. And I was just completely floored at how much crossover there already is in adult education and how important it was to be able to get the word out about this, because there were so many connections that adult ed folks had just to make sure that the folks knew that they could work with their libraries to deliver those services in there. And the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is that obviously the more skills you have, the more information that you're able to share with just those increasing your skill set. Anyway, I wanted to share that because I just feel like digital navigators is something that libraries have been doing for so long, but then seeing it sort of recreated in this adult ed world, which has a major portion of it going towards workforce initiatives, which libraries could partner with, it just makes sense to leverage all of those different state agency funds as well. And the idea of a call center for technical assistance has always been something that's been, I think a lot of different people have tried, but in terms of helping people with those digital skills, the idea of having one number to call, that piece kind of gets left out sometimes about what do you do when their students not in class or the library is closed or they don't have access. So I just think including that in some sense of how to continue to assist folks with their skill development when their teachers are gone. Just wanted to add that in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think those examples are just both really incredible. We, in addition to the program that we did on career navigators in libraries, we also, ALA did a program about federal funding for digital equity. And I know that there's still some of that ARPA money sloshing around in state and local entities. And I think there is still an opportunity if you have a program that has not been funded. I think it's worth checking around and seeing, particularly if it relates to workforce and or digital literacy and or digital inclusion, particularly for folks that were affected by the pandemic. I think there's still money out there, but it's not visible at the national level, right? Like all the money has been dispersed to the states and localities, but they have not spent all of their money and they have a few more years to do it. So I really appreciate both of you mentioning that, because I really think there is so much happening at the state level, and there's federal dollars that are still making that happen. And in fact, that's a perfect segue to my next topic, which is about IIJA, which I'm guessing and I'm hoping all of you have already been hearing about and talking about at the state level. No shock here, but if you are not paying attention to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the programs that came up, I think this is another area where ALA is paying as much attention as we can, and also are really invite and welcome all of you to share your examples and stories about what you're doing with this funding and any models. Cindy and I had talked about this at a convening, gosh, not quite a year ago. And I don't think ALA and COSLA have figured it out yet, like how to create a repository to share resources. So like if something awesome is happening in Texas, we can make it available to every other state. Like if they've done a needs assessment, why do that 50 different times? So we haven't solved for that, but I think there's still a need for it. And I think groups like LibsWork provides a platform for that kind of information sharing. So this is just a quick rundown. If you haven't been paying close attention to what's available through IIJA, I'm going to talk mostly about the Digital Equity Act program because that is the most related to digital literacy and digital inclusion. But all of these, but both the BEAD program and the Digital Equity Act program relates to, has a workforce component, right? Like it's about supporting, it's not just broadband for broadband's sake, it's broadband for education, it's broadband for workforce, it's broadband for telehealth. So it's a use case that is part of that. So here's what that looks like in terms of the dollar amounts. I will mention that libraries are eligible for sure for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment dollars, as well as the Digital Equity Act program dollars. The Affordable Connectivity Program, if you are not familiar, that is funding that goes directly to low-income households. Libraries can and have been playing a role in helping folks learn about this federal program and also helping them enroll. And the Public Library Association has built modules now that will be available where people can be walked through the program, and also some training resources. So that will be online, if not this month, next month. So we'll do a big bunch of promotion, but I wanted to just kind of flag that it's coming, and that hopefully that if you have libraries that are interested, particularly in smaller and more rural communities, we're also looking at providing a toolkit that's really specifically focused on smaller and rural libraries and how they can help people in their community get access to this funding to enable home broadband access. So just a couple quick notes on that. Let's see. So the Digital Equity Act, there's 3 tranches similar to other federal funding programs. The first 60 million has already been dispersed or is being dispersed. If you have not had like a state summit kind of launching this yet, you probably will have soon. we talked with NTIA staff because there was not a calendar of when every state is coming online with their Digital Equity Act planning program. They now have a map that will tell you more about the kind of the state of affairs and who the lead is. So we're working to try and get more information out about that. So not only do you know what's happening in your state, but you also could look and see what's happening in other states, which for me, ALA is always valuable because different approaches can sometimes be useful in different states, but they're not always visible to us. So the first 60 million is already out there and states are actively working on this. The reason that we are paying so much attention to it is this 60 million unlocks 1.4 billion. So this capacity grant program will be based on the planning grant. So if libraries are not in the plan, then it will be much harder for libraries to get access to the capacity grant funding. So this is the moment, right, between now and the end of the year that libraries have to be visible to these stakeholders so that they are part of the plan and part of the implementation for these capacity grants. Like the digital equity planning grant, it's a formula that will be dispersed to the states. The good news is I don't think we're looking at sam.gov application issues, right? Like this will be money that can go straight to libraries, often through the state library agency, which is what we have recommended, is that all of this planning include the state library agency because you're the most knowledgeable and most connected to libraries across your state. But if that doesn't happen, it could be through regions. I heard from NTIA that in Ohio, for instance, they're taking a regional approach. So they're not doing a statewide, they're aggregating up from, I don't know how many regions, 6 or 8 regions. So there's different ways that different states are going about this work. And lastly, the competitive grant program is a little bit away. It won't open up until the end of next year, the beginning of 2025, but it's definitely something we're thinking about. It's kind of the third bite at the apple. So where these capacity grants don't reach people that are targeted or are not getting to communities that need it, this competitive grant program is an opportunity for state library agencies, for ALA, for PLA, for other nonprofits and community anchor organizations to put forward a competitive grant proposal. And our guess is that big proposals will be very welcome because it makes it easier for them to give out a bunch of money. So this is something where we have been talking about how might we support school libraries, public libraries, and academic libraries in reaching all of the communities they serve, for instance. I think another important thing that I would call out, if this is not on your radar, is the focus on covered populations. This new IIJA funding is really geared to reaching unserved and underserved, and it's much more targeted than the BTOP program was, which I think is a benefit. And I think it's also an opportunity for us to think about how are libraries reaching these communities. And I think where we are doing it, where we have success stories, particularly if we think about rural libraries, right? We should say that, and we should look to be visible on that work. And where we have an opportunity, where we know that we have people in our community that have language barriers, and we haven't been able to reach them because we haven't had the funding or the capacity, this is the moment to ask for that funding, to make the case, say, we know we have an underserved community of folks and we are prepared to reach them, but we have a gap that we need to fill. So I think it's really important to understand these covered populations. So it's not just that we serve everyone, which of course we do, but we also serve and are able to have reach into very specific communities that they know have been underserved and unserved in the past. These are a few notes just about what we have been hearing about the plans at the state level. So these are all of the pieces that they are including in their planning process by virtue of the guidelines they've received from NTIA. They also have a requirement to engage and to prove that they have engaged community partners. One of the conversations that we had with NTIA folks was that there is also a requirement to show that these plans have been made with the voice of people in the covered populations, right? So it's not just did libraries who serve these folks, but did we talk to people who are experiencing homelessness? Did we talk to folks in the immigrant and refugee community? Do we know what they want and need, what their barriers are? And one of the things that I heard from NTIA is that this is something they're concerned about, and they are hearing from their state broadband offices, they are concerned about it. Like, how do they bring forward the voice of these community members? And I think there is an opportunity for libraries to help with that. That where we can create, either bring forward, invite people who are in our public computing centers, who are using our public access technology to say, hey, there is an opportunity for you to speak to this process. Are you interested, right? Like, so that we don't, or can we share their story? But I think if we were to invite people to share themselves and or to speak with and for them, I think there's a huge need for this. And I think it's something that libraries could do, knowing that it takes time. But I think that there's a need, an unmet need that libraries are uniquely well positioned to help with, as well as other community-based organizations that directly serve these communities and covered populations. So I think I already said this. And then the competitive grant program, just a little bit more about what's eligible for that, in case that you don't know. And I will make sure that Andrea has the slides and is able to share them out. This is the timeline, so you can see, in terms of what I really appreciate about how thoughtful this program is relative to BTOP, and obviously it's a different time. Unemployment is not, as high as it was during the BTOP, is that there's a 5-year runway. So we have a little bit more time. But again, this planning part is happening right now, and it will determine so much about what will happen with the implementation grants. So one of the things that we did was we had a convening and we heard from libraries of all types, school, public, and academic, and we tried to capture as much information from that conversation to illustrate what is possible through libraries. And we published this report, which I think we probably sent to you all, but just know that it's available and you're welcome to share it if it's helpful to you, or to steal whatever you might want to use as a template. Like, really, our goal is to keep libraries visible and to show what's possible. So I'm going to pause again. I talked pretty fast. And I know that you all are doing some of this work. So there may be things that you are seeing or hearing, or questions that you have, or requests that you might have for ALA. Here are the opportunities that I think are available to us through this. And this bring forward underserved voices is the one that I was mentioning. And then also thinking about the challenges that we see and what are the solutions. And the last item, as you probably have seen, that there's a real, particularly those of you that follow the National Skills Coalition, this focus on how do we upskill folks so that they can get these high paying telecommunications jobs that are coming when the broadband equity and inclusion, that the BEAD funding is out, and that we'll start building those broadband networks next year. We need people to do that work, and we don't have enough of them. So is there an opportunity for libraries to be part of helping to upskill those folks? And I think there might be. I don't know what that looks like, but it occurs to me that there's an opportunity for us. So I'm going to pause again and just see if folks have things you want to add, ask.
Larra, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm in Charlotte Mecklenburg Library.
Sure.
Obviously, these things are going to need private partnerships to make happen, since we can't build the infrastructure ourselves. Or
Yeah.
how does that?
Yeah.
Is that what we're looking at as well with the money? Or?
I believe so. I have paid less attention to the BEAD money, even though it's a boatload more money. Like, the Digital Equity Act funding, it's like 4 orders of magnitude greater. But the BEAD funding is prioritized for unserved, underserved, and then community anchors last. So I'm worried there won't be any money left for community anchors. So I have paid less attention to the BEAD program, but you are right, David, that it will be almost certainly that the bulk of that infrastructure build will happen by private entities. So the nature of broadband programs, for any of you who may not have already seen this, is that it's often federal money going for programs and projects that then goes back into that money goes directly to private companies, right? Very often. So it's not impossible that municipal networks and other folks might be involved, and particularly when we think about middle mile. But you're absolutely right, David, that a lot of this money will go to the traditional broadband providers.
So tagging on to that, I'm sure a lot of us here have been seeing some of the issues that have been popping up on the NDIA listserv with all the loopholes for how low-income people are not being able to get the stuff that they're supposed to be getting because it's expensive to be poor. You're like, oh, you have an outstanding bill, so you're not qualified for this. Just there's so much crap that's been that in a perfect world, that stuff should be just dealt with as like, yeah, that's not going to be a barrier, but it's also another argument for at least getting some stuff to libraries so that we're not playing those little games with people, that's just been very frustrating to see, and I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Kind of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, kind of on a similar vein, I started today taking Education Superhighway has an ACP enrollment course that I started taking. And I cannot believe, like, for a process that's so simple, if you start thinking about if somebody doesn't have the documents or they don't have the skills, how difficult it is to apply for ACP, that it is so important for people to be there to help and to give people the tools of how do you contact whatever place to get the document that you need? How do you get the ID that you need? How do you even have, because you can't apply on behalf of someone. So you have to almost teach them digital skills on the spot. So anytime that you're reaching into these underserved communities, you do have all of these layers of barriers that, you could say that a process is simple, or you could say that a solution is simple, but often it's not. And I will share the link to that course.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, this is why so many folks look to libraries, is there's a massive disconnect in what we're asking. Most federal programs, just as we're talking about sam.gov and small libraries, when you think about individual folks that have likely lower education levels, lower digital literacy, and you're asking them to work through a really complex online form, the gap is just massive. You're absolutely right. Anything else in terms of IIJA, anything you're seeing or hearing from your state broadband offices, any stories or examples, things you're excited about from the planning process, things that are going well? And you're welcome to shoot me an email separate from this if you think of stuff. I'm just curious how this is working for people. So we don't have to drill into it too much here, but I'm very interested to hear what folks are experiencing and what you're hearing. Are you hearing anything about the Digital Equity Act planning? Are you involved? How's that going?
Hi, Laura, it's Arlene from Oregon. I put in the chat that we feel like we are really behind in our planning. We know that our office got their award, but they are so understaffed right now that we just haven't heard anything, and they're just barely keeping up with, you know, what they need to do to get BEAD stuff in place. So it
Totally.
sounds like that's happening in other states. And I think that's, you know, I assume NTIA is aware of this, but I think it's going to be a problem in terms of, you know, looking for these offices to really start engaging stakeholders. I mean, that's a time consuming process. And if they don't have capacity, you
Yeah.
know, to build out those processes, it's going to be a problem. And honestly, you know, it's hard even to do outreach with them because they
Yeah.
are so overwhelmed with work. So that's what we're experiencing here. And
Mhm.
I'm hopeful that things will improve over the course of this year, but I really think that that's going to impact some of our momentum around these issues in our state, at least. So.
You know, that I think makes a ton of sense, Arlene, and that aligns with what I've also heard. I do wonder, we've obviously in our comments, we've tried to keep state library agencies visible, and we think, as with libraries, there's a lot that is possible, but we also appreciate that, like ALA, you are all resource constrained yourself, and you're trying to do a lot of really important things. But I do wonder if there's an opportunity, and I guess I would ask, maybe folks can shoot me a note offline if you don't feel comfortable talking about it here, is, you know, would state library agencies, would any of you be interested in, like, what if there was a subcontract for you to manage the outreach and engagement process? In theory, I don't know that it's so easy as that, but NTIA has established a monthly meeting with library organizations. CAUSELA's part of that, ALA's part of that, the Urban Libraries Council, the Association of Rural and Small. So we have a monthly touch point, and we could encourage that. Obviously, they have already told us that states decide what to do. They are not the boss of the states, but they could perhaps suggest this is an opportunity for them to consider the strength that exists in state library agencies in terms of engagement and outreach. So I don't know that that would be of interest to folks, but I do think you're not alone in that issue. And so many broadband offices were created yesterday. And all the money, you know, is in BEAD. I mean, a lot of the money. And so the funding that's, I think, most readily available to us is not their focus. So thank you for that. All right, let's see, what time is it? It's 1:15. So please keep putting stuff in the chat. I assume, Andrea, you can share that with me since I know I'm not keeping up. But I really appreciate everybody's comments and feedbacks. If we don't have a chance to talk verbally, please do throw it up in the chat because I'm really interested. Okay, so my next to the last item that I just want to mention to all of you is the potential for reauthorization of the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. ALA began talking particularly with Senator Reed, who, as most of you know, is a library champion, but he's also been a champion for school libraries and for adult education. So they've had really outstanding outreach to ALA and also to the National Coalition for Literacy, and actively engaging adult education and libraries as they think about the opportunities through a reauthorization. So these are some of the items that we worked on with them specifically. And I'm going to ask if Natalie wants to talk a little bit about career navigators. I have a couple of slides in here because that, to me, is, I think, an opportunity that, as with digital literacy, this one-on-one with digital navigators, with career navigators, with community navigators, this one-on-one attention and this individualized approach just makes the most sense, particularly when we think about folks that have been the most marginalized and had the least access to resources. That individual attention makes a lot of sense. The other thing that I think is really important about career navigators when we're at nearly full employment is that there's really an opportunity to not just talk about work or jobs, but to talk about careers and to talk about higher paying growth sectors. So that it's not just about getting a job, which everybody likely needs, but it's also about how can you get the best job possible in a way that will support you and your family. So this is also something that the adult education community is interested in, this idea of college and career navigators, helping folks get a leg up in terms of not just thinking about a job, but thinking about a pathway, a career pathway. So to me, this fits with our commitment to EDI, inclusion and equity and diversity, and it is a huge need. And I think it's, again, there may be more opportunities to try and capture folks that are leaving the workforce because it's not working for them. It's not working for their families as they think about post-pandemic life, and to actually think about what do they actually want, you know, and exposing them to careers. And I know Tammy has talked about this, like with the dialysis technicians, right? Like who knows about dialysis as a career path, right? And to know that this is a growing sector where there are jobs and where folks, the wages are good, right? So I think this fits as well with libraries as a place for exploration. So for me, I think there's just a huge opportunity here, as well as incorporating digital and information literacy, increasing the funding, and just overall, our consistent message to DOL and to Congress has been that they need to make it easier for libraries to be funded for the work they're already doing. And we're not a traditional workforce agency. Obviously, it's kind of a square peg in a round hole, and we just need to figure out ways to recognize and support libraries. So these were the proposals that we've worked on. You can see the actual bill language. It has not been introduced in this new Congress. I have not talked with Reed staff yet to see if they have a timetable for that, but based on the hearing that was held, I want to say it was in the Senate, a Senate hearing on February 9th, and I can confirm that for folks. There was a ton of interest, and again, from Republicans and Democrats in connecting workforce innovation opportunity with the Higher Education Act and figuring out how do we work on these pathways for college and career. So I think something could happen. Republicans are likely to be less excited about increasing the fund. So that's probably where we'd have to do some convincing. But I do think that Republicans are really open to how do other players operate in the ecosystem. And we've had pretty good conversations with folks on the Republican side of the committees in the House and Senate, because they're interested in all the money not necessarily just going to workforce agencies, which they may not always appreciate all the time. So how might there be other institutions that could play a role? And obviously, we don't want to take funding away from workforce agencies. We want to find a way to work in a complementary fashion that leverages library assets as well as the assets of the workforce agencies. So I think it's too early to tell. I don't have a read on what will happen, but I do think there is potential here for bipartisan activity. And I'm going to ask Natalie to talk a little bit about what Career Navigator looks like at her library, if folks will, because I think we have enough time for that. So I have a couple of slides, Natalie, if you want to come off mute and maybe say a little bit about, because I think you have had a really successful program, and I also love how it ties in with your unemployment insurance and helping folks stay eligible.
Happy to do that, Larra. I'll try to be quick. And I did put a link in the chat to the site where we advertise our career navigators. And we expected to be hiring 2 more. So we're excited about that. We started our Career Navigator program with a dislocated workers grant that we received from our Workforce Investment Board at the start of COVID. That gave us $60,000 that we used to hire 3 part-time, we called them career change navigators at the time, which we used to help people who found jobs, who lost jobs through COVID, find new jobs. And to tell you how we did that, we interviewed people. We were required as part of the grant to hire people who were unemployed due to COVID as well. So they were all different. They had different backgrounds. We then ran them through all of our traditional job search classes that we offer here, and we trained them in basic circulation and public service desk kind of staff. The program worked out extremely well. Once the grant ended, our director was so happy with the results that he added the positions to our staff. One person who was part-time, he was actually 75, and he was the former human resources director for the Cincinnati Reds, decided, nah, he'd rather be home. So we have 2, but we're looking to add more. And our career navigators are on deck. They handle people coming into our buildings that are looking for jobs. But we started with a little link on our site that people could request appointments with them, and found that just didn't work. It was way better to just put the information out there and have our staff refer people to them, and they set up the appointments. Their hours are kind of opposite. So we have someone on deck the entire time the library's open, except possibly Sundays sometimes. We definitely take advantage of what Larra has up there, that we're the trusted front door, and we attract a lot of people looking for jobs. What's happened here in Kentucky, and Hillary could speak to this as well, my wonderful state librarian counterpart up there. But in Kentucky, House Bill 4 was passed, which requires anyone receiving unemployment insurance in the state of Kentucky to complete 5 work search requirements every week. What that is about is they have to either apply or interview for 3 jobs online. The other 2 things that they need to do is attend a job search skills class at a public library in Kentucky, or a hiring event, or a networking event, which can be at any public library in Kentucky. So it's wonderful for us, since we were in the position that we already had the classes set up and ready to go. Staff at our American Job Center, which is the Kentucky Career Center here, could immediately refer people who are collecting unemployment directly to us. So to give you an idea, in January of this year compared to January of 2022, the number of people attending our job search skills program increased by 60%. So we're a system of 160,000 people. We have 3 branches, so nowhere near like a New York or a Portland or Boston or a place like that. But we had 1,000 people attend our classes just in January. So we were very excited about how that all worked out. And the organization, it's a social services agency that has the RFP for our WIBS career services right now, reached out to us because they recognized we are the trusted front door, especially in the past year where we've hit the demographic drought. Now there's a lot of jobs out there going unfulfilled, that we were still seeing people coming into our branches looking for jobs. So they included us in their RFP that they submitted to our Workforce Investment Board to have a career navigator on site at one of our branches that could directly enroll people looking for jobs into WIOA services. So we're excited about that. So if you have any questions or need any links to any of our services, you're welcome to reach out to me too. Thanks. Anything else you wanted me to mention, Lara, that I skipped?
No, I think that's perfect. And I'm happy. I have slide decks from both of the programs that we did at LibLearnX. The federal broadband one is hefty. It would have to go on some drive somewhere because we really dig quite much more deeply into all of these things, because we had about an hour and 15 minutes. So anyway, if you'd like me to try and share any of those decks in addition to these, I'm happy to do that. Let's see. Okay. So thoughts, reactions, ideas. I do think we're not in a full court press when and if we hear from Senator Reid that they're looking to reintroduce. And the other great thing I forgot to mention is that the introduction at the end of last year was bipartisan. So that's the only chance whenever somebody tells me that there's a new bill that was only sponsored by Democrats or only sponsored by Republicans. I'm way less interested, but they have a Republican co-sponsor, Senator Young in Indiana. So yay. So having a bipartisan co-sponsor for this gives us some more hope that it will go somewhere. So when and if this bill is reintroduced, then I think we'll be in prime time. So I invite all of you to think about the examples of work that you're already doing, as well as the barriers that you have experienced in accessing WIOA funding, because we have not yet had this opportunity to continue to improve WIOA, but I think it's coming. And I feel like I'm kind of in a constant state of readiness. We had been talking with Senator Reid's staff in 2021. We thought they might introduce 2 years ago, but that wasn't the case. But we did get it at the end of last year. So it's kind of a moving target. Thoughts, things that you're hearing, any reactions to this or ideas? And again, an invitation to all of you to share the work that you're doing, because I will tell you, I use it all the time. Every time I have an opportunity to get into a meeting, I'm talking about all the work that all of you do, which is why I'm sorry that this meeting conflicts with a standing ALA staff meeting that I have, which is why I'm not able to join you more often. But I'll pause again, because you may have questions for Natalie or other comments. And I only have one other item that's pretty quick.
I see Lisa has her hand raised, and I know that you're gonna have to get going, Lisa. So
yeah, thank you so much. This is so great. So please share all the slide decks. Yes, I just wanted to especially point out, Natalie, thank you so much for pointing out the documentation needs. We do still have some layoffs happening in the work world, and my husband just recently went through one, and he's not a stupid guy, okay? But to apply for unemployment, he now has to, if you have to take a picture of your government issue ID, you have to take a selfie of yourself holding your government issue ID. You have to take a picture of your birth certificate or your passport. You have to take a picture of something that's got your physical address on it, like a utility bill or something like that. You can't scan it as a JPEG, I learned. You have to take a photograph of it. It's not the same thing. There were so many hurdles that I actually had to call in a favor with a colleague over at DOL and be like, can you help us out here? And one of the jobs he applied for is a municipal one, but they're like, yeah, mail in a letter of application and resume. Because I don't know, it's 1980, I guess. And you know, the way the mails are running. And 2 weeks later, we checked in, and it was a good thing because they never received it. You know, so then we had, and this is just an example of a lot of the frontline stuff. The people that are getting lost in these kind of scoops of things that we see mostly like in rural areas. You think about areas where somebody doesn't have a smartphone, doesn't know how to use a smartphone, doesn't have good connectivity to do all this stuff. What the hell are they supposed to do? You know, in our career centers, we have 12 statewide, but 255 public libraries. So where are they going to go? And that's just the sort of stuff, Laura, thank you. You're doing God's work out there, because the individual stories are, there's always head scratchers for our people, like, oh gosh, you know, well, those oh goshes are happening quite a bit. Just thank you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, Lisa. I think there's just millions of people literally going through this, and it drives me crazy that, number one, folks don't know about that, but then two, they don't recognize the role that rural libraries are playing, and are not funding them to support that vital intermediary role. It just makes me crazy. Other folks, other thoughts, things to add?
There was a question in the chat for Natalie that Natalie, you may have answered in the chat, but if you had anything to say.
I did. That was our wonderful friend Elizabeth Waikia. Hi, Elizabeth. We have both career navigators, which are paid staff members. They both teach classes, they help all the everyday patrons that come into the buildings, and anyone can schedule appointments with them. They're really experts on our library resources and how we can help and how we work with our community partners. But we also have, and this is what Elizabeth asked about, we have a set of 13 volunteer coaches, and they support what we call the Northern Kentucky Accountability Group. And that is a whole separate program that we do. That's a job search support group for professional people that are in transition, people that want to re-enter the workforce, people unhappy in their jobs, or employers that are just looking for good people. And they are different. I put the site in there. They have different backgrounds. They like to help people with different things. For example, we have one woman who's actually our assistant superintendent of schools. And we have such a shortage of teachers in our area. She serves as a volunteer coach for anyone that is interested, even remotely, in becoming a teacher in Kentucky. Mm-hmm. She will look over their background, their education, their work experience, and familiarize them with next steps. So if you can look over the list and see what the different people do. But that our volunteer program has grown, is big. So they even have their own name tags these days.
So cool. You're doing such great work. It's always a pleasure to hear what all of you are up to. And I just want to thank Natalie for always, saying yes when I ask her to come speak with me or for libraries. And I know that that's work that all of you do as well. So just thank you for that. Here's my last slide, other than some links that as I mentioned, I was talking with folks just about an hour ago at the Department of Labor that they have been tasked to reach out to libraries, and they have asked if ALA and PLA would be willing to run a webinar for the library community about Career One Stop. And do that. But I also told them I was going to talk to all of you and see, one, if you're interested, if you think you have lives.
Uh-oh, Larra, I think you're
she froze. Sometimes she comes back. Okay.
But I think we definitely would be interested in that webinar. So I'll make sure that she knows that just in case she doesn't come back. Uh-oh.
Let's hope for the best. Oh, there she is.
There you are.
She's back.
I'm like, wait, where did they go? Did I like just totally run out of time? I'm like, holy cats. Sorry, friends. Now, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden you were gone. Okay, this screen is not super critical, but I'm going to put it back up. Let's see. All right. So, and I guess I'm curious here or later, if you all want to, are there things that you would like them to talk more about in the Career One Stop? You know, favorite things that you wish every librarian that you've ever met knew that you would like them to highlight, things that you don't like, things that you wish they had. If you or any of your libraries are, you know, frequent users of the website, this is the chance, I think, to you know, give them a nudge where we think that they could do better, or where we would like them to spend time if we do this webinar. So if you have any suggestions for me or things that you would like to hear, make sure that they cover, you know, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to do some work. But oh, they did say that they read the research from Measures That Matter. They read all of the case studies, and they now are going to develop the content for the presentation based on what they read from that research. So yay for that, in terms of it not being a generic, you know, go here and do that. But if you have comments, I'm going to stop talking again. Anything that you would like to make sure I know or that I send to them, again, you can email me otherwise. But it seems like a good idea. And then we would also have it archived. They will either do it through PLA's webinar platform, or we'll do it through Workforce GPS. And they've asked for 90 minutes.
Definitely, Lori Davis mentioned to have them cover skills and interest sections of the Career One Stop, but I'd like to see them to go into depth on highlighting the specific areas of ONET online that we should be utilizing.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Please throw it in the chat, since Andrea's promised me that I'll get a copy of that. Anything else that strikes you? One of the things that they did mention relative, not necessarily just with ONET, but it's about the local information that they have available. So I thought that would be really valuable, particularly for local public libraries. Like, how do you get your information? So I might ask them to just walk through an example or two where they say, okay, I'm in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Where do I go? And to kind of help people understand what happens with the local information, and particularly as it relates to labor market information, and kind of training opportunities in the local market. So thank you for that. Any other suggestions are very welcome. Anything else that is on your mind? Questions for me, ideas for me, things that you're seeing or hearing that you are concerned about or excited about? Anything else that I should be paying attention to? If we're talking with NTIA staff that are working on Digital Equity Act, one of the things that we've asked them to enable for us is to have an opportunity for library folks, probably ALA and COSLA, to speak to the state broadband offices about the roles that libraries can and do play, and or other folks that are involved with the Digital Equity Act programs. So that might happen. They seemed interested in the idea. They haven't committed yet, but I'm hoping that we'll have an opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing and the capacity that we can bring to the planning process. But that hasn't been committed yet. But anything else that folks would like to ask or share or request, I'm wide open.
Natalie, that's a good idea.
Okay,
To see if we can find somebody.
right.
You know, I just got an email from the Colorado School of Mining asking about libraries and digital literacy and an interest in talking to folks about how they could do some upskilling related to robotics. So if anybody's interested in talking to folks in Colorado. And I actually just got a proposal from a library consultant about doing a multi-part program on ChatGPT. So if you'd like, I can let her know. I don't know if you all know Linda Braun. She's one of my favorite consultants. I forget what her
name is so familiar.
Yeah, she was a past president of the Young Adult Library Services Association. So she does a ton of YA stuff, but she's also like a super techie. But she does a really nice job of communicating tech topics for a non-tech audience, in my experience. So she just sent me a note about some work she's doing on ChatGPT, and it's also a topic that ALA is looking at. We are also thinking like we should be talking about this in the library world. So I appreciate the suggestion, Natalie. Oh,
and I'm delinquent on this. I was supposed to follow up and try to find us a speaker to update us on Grow with Google, but I just haven't had time. So if you, any of those people, okay.
I do actually. Wow, I love it when like things actually intersect at the right time and place. Keep it coming, because actually I have answers to some of these things, which isn't always the case. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I got nothing. But we had a follow-up conversation. We had folks at Grow with Google reach out to us at PLA because they're interested in doing something related to information literacy, and so we're in conversation about what that might look like. So I do have contacts, Natalie. So I'm not sure if I have we talked to a handful of people over at Grow with Google, so I'll send over their information.
Thank you. Lots going on, that's for sure.
Yes. And I think I had a thought, and it may have flown out of my head, but maybe this will spark something else. But I know that our NTIA rep, or somebody who's working in this area, has really been making the rounds to, like, she's speaking at the state workforce board meeting tomorrow. And she has been showing up at different events, and they're doing more. So it sounds like, you know, even at the local level, they are really trying to make connections with the local organizations, the community partners. It seems like it's a lot of fact finding right now, which has been really positive to see, you know, her name continually popping up at different things. So I hope that other areas have the same experience right now.
Can you say who that is, Andrea, or can you shoot me a note about the person?
Her first name is Bryn, and I'll have to look up her last name. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the folks from NTIA that's working on their technical assistance, she was at the ALA conference in January in New Orleans, and her name is Rochelle Crotty, Crotty, who some of you may know because she worked with Sharon Strover at the out in Texas, and she supported the mobile hotspot lending kind of IMLS funded project. Anyway, she's at NTIA now, and they have a growing technical assistance, and that's also my experience, Andrea, is they're trying to understand what the needs are so that they can provide guidance and support. And I feel like we've been given an invitation actually to ask for stuff. Like, what do libraries need? Like what, and again, they're not the boss of the states. They don't know what every state is doing all of the time, but they're really trying to understand what the needs are and how they can support it. And like all of us, drinking from a fire hose and in kind of a reactive mode. So they're asking, like, if we want something, we need to raise our hand and ask for it. So I invite all of you to think about that, whether it's somebody locally, like Andrea was saying, is kind of making the rounds, or if there's something that you'd like COSLA or ALA to bring forward. You know, how could they help us help other people? So that's a question I'm thinking about, and I don't have a good answer to, but I appreciate the invitation.
Right, we are hitting that point in the meeting where people have to drop off and also people start to get quiet. But I don't want to cut things off in case anybody has something that they want to say. So make sure if we're coming up to speak now or forever hold your peace. But while you are still here, I do want to just let you know that our meeting next month is March 14th. And Lisa and Landis from Maine will be giving us an update on Bendable, Maine. So you don't want to miss that. I did put the description in the Outlook or the calendar invitation. And tomorrow I'll be sending out the link to the recording of this meeting along with the links that were shared in chat. Larra, I'll make sure that you get the full chat transcript so you see everything. But that information will go around as well. Right, Natalie, did you have something? I saw you unmuted yourself.
I was just going to say, if you guys do set a date for the LibsWork get together, if we do it in the evening like we did at PLA that time, it would be great for anyone new to come, because like none of us knew each other years ago, and in going to those things was real helpful. But I might just be able to go for a day, but I'd like to plan around that if you know, and you can let the rest of us know.
Definitely. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Larra.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's so nice to be here with everyone. Thanks for your comments and questions and ideas, and please keep them coming. Our work is only as good as your work, really. So I appreciate everything that you're willing and able to share.
Yes.
Awesome.
And thank you so much for fitting us into your very busy schedule. When I sent that email to ask you to speak, I was thinking your email inbox is probably jam-packed with so many things, and that you made room in your schedule for us is just, and to provide such incredible information is just wonderful. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Truly my pleasure. And hope to see all of you in Chicago.